And now I have the distinct privilege to introduce the Mayor Kel Paguda, who will be delivering our opening remarks today. Mayor was elected in 2018 after serving as Prescott Valley police officer for nearly 16 years. He currently sits on the executive board of Boys and Girls Club of Northern Arizona and was elected as mayor of Prescott Valley in 2022. He continues to serve the community in many ways. So please welcome Mayor Palguda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. And more importantly, thank you for the work that you guys do every single day to protect and secure Arizona's most precious resource. As public servants, scientists, engineers, and policy leaders, we know this truth well. Our work is never truly done. Stewardship of our natural resources is not a box to be checked, but a responsibility handed down from one generation to the next. The choices we make today ripple forward into the lives of our children and our grandchildren. And that's why our presence here matters. I hope that we represent the best of what it means to meet our challenges here in Prescott Valley, and as well, all around the state. With data, creativity, and commitment, we live in a world that often rewards short-term thinking. We need to choose the more difficult path, one rooted in innovation, long-term planning, and proactive problem-solving. There is no easy route to water security or land and wildlife management in a desert state. But there is a correct one, and it lies in collaboration, courage, and the persistent belief that we can shape a resilient future through the strength of our ideas and the integrity of our actions. So on behalf of Prescott Valley and the communities that you serve, thank you for being part of that mission. We are proud to stand with you in this adventure. To begin today's event, I would like to invite Hunter Moore and the panelists who will be part of our first presentation to the stage. And while they come up, let me introduce Hunter. Hunter is part of our Prescott Valley team and helped us to work with some of our most important friends at the legislature: Arizona Department of Water Resources, Salt River Project, and surrounding communities. He brings nearly 20 years of public policy experience in municipal, county, state, and federal government, and most recently served for 5 years as Governor Doug Ducey's #1 policy leader in natural resources. In his work, he has negotiated on the management of the Colorado River, tribal water settlements, groundwater policy, energy, and other topics. Our town manager, Gilbert Davison, and Hunter have brought a group of experts together to explore what we think is a missed opportunity in water policy. And we are asking some of the most experienced yet forward-thinking thought leaders to look at our approach of harvesting water that would otherwise evaporate for the sole purpose of benefiting the local aquifer. You see, every year storm events deliver large amounts of moisture to us, but practically all of our water evaporates, leaving virtually no chance to become part of our aquifers. We have challenged ourselves to find ways to bring that missed opportunity to heal, but we were making it a smooth as fast approach. Instead of dreaming up the idea on paper and asking policymakers to make hard decisions, we are testing our ideas in real-world situations and trying to learn what really makes sense and can really work for everyone. So our panel of distinguished experts is going to walk you through the reasons that this idea is important to the concept of safe yield and the missed opportunity that stormwater presents, the conceptual framework of our project, and legal rights that we are committed to respect and things that we have not yet solved. I invite you to consider this initiative in the true spirit of what it is, just an idea. So thank you, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hunter Moore, and it's a pleasure to be with you. This is a terrific venue, and thanks to Green Living Magazine and to the town of Prescott Valley and all the sponsors for organizing such a great event. And thank you to you for being here to learn and to be part of this conversation and to learn about the things that are happening here in the Prescott Valley area. Before we begin the questions, I want to turn to our panel members and ask them to introduce themselves, not only some of their professional background, but the context in which their expertise matters for for this conversation around stormwater. So I'll start to my right with Tracy Lund, and then move over to Ricardo Aguirre, followed by Lucas Shaw with SRP, and then Don Clark with Terracon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Lund. I am the Water Resources Advisor for the town, and I'm delighted to be here. So a little bit about my background. I am an ASU grad, and yes, thank you. And I am from Minnesota originally, so I graduated during the recession and had to move back to Minnesota, but really was dying to get back to Arizona just because, well, it's Arizona, come on. So yeah, my background is in basically water chemistry educationally, but kind of stumbled into hydrogeology and a little bit of groundwater flow modeling, which I despised, but this basically, I see this job as kind of the culmination of all of my educational experiences and all of all of my interests, really, because I do a huge amount of outreach and love to talk to folks about just nerd out over this water situation here. We've got a lot to talk about, a lot to address with hopefully innovative new approaches to try to address safe yield here in the Prescott Valley area.
Thanks, Tracy. Ricardo, would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Ricardo Aguirre. I'm the Director of Land Management and Water Security at West Consultants. The reason I'm here actually is because of a dramatic event that happened to me almost 15 years ago, and that was the birth of my son. And in that moment, I didn't realize it was about me anymore. It was about him, his generation, and beyond. And so I started looking at what I was taught in school, graduate school, undergrad, and realized that I was only given 3 tools as a drainage engineer: a pipe, a channel, and a hole in the ground. And that I was taught to centralize this resource of stormwater and dispose of it. And in that moment, though, of his birth, I projected a conversation, imagined a conversation with him in the future where he asked me about 12 to 15 years in the future, as a civil engineer, did you know the environment was degrading and were you in a position to do something about it? And I didn't want that answer to be, yes, I knew, and no, I didn't do anything about it. So in that moment, I started to embark on this change of reinventing myself and largely probably my profession, which led to, again, being here today, looking at water the way nature does, decentralizing the resource of water, treating it like an asset, and making sure that that resource can be available for him, his generation, and beyond. So more specifically, looking to partner with nature, things like nature-based solutions. Engineering with nature is another term. So this is the focus that I have and have been brought on at West Consultants to develop a land management service line that is resolutely focused on long-term water security. And so things like restoring watershed function, mitigating symptoms of desertification, and certainly declining water tables and what we can do to address safe yield issues. And so that's largely my introduction. I went to U of A and Illinois for whatever that's worth.
Okay, we've got one ASU, one U of A, and I think NAU's up next. Lucas Shaw.
Hold on. Oh, there we go. Yeah, my name is Lucas Shaw, and I am a NAU grad. So far we've got 3
All
out
of our
4,
institutions
maybe.
are represented
Just
here.
about. So, yeah, my name is Lucas Shaw. I work for the Salt River Project. I'm the Director of Water Rights and Contracts there at SRP. I've worked for SRP for about 16 years, most of those on the water side of the company, and again, most of those in water rights related issues. I work with several communities around the state to work on water challenges. If you can't tell, there's a lot of passion here about water resources, and that's true. You'll find that throughout the water industry, is that when people get into it, they really want to not only share the knowledge of what they know, but also share ideas and solutions. And that's what I've really tried to do throughout my career. I work a lot with municipalities and tribal communities right now, and really try and listen to the needs of those communities and find ways to address those needs in a way that protects SRP and our interests, as well as meet the needs of others. So that's it.
Thank you, Lucas. Mr. Clark.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Don Clark, and I am a senior principal with Terracon Consultants in Phoenix, in our Phoenix office. And I'm a consulting geotechnical engineer. So some of you might not know what geotechnical engineering is, but that is a fancy term for soil engineering. And so I deal with soils and projects, and as you can imagine, any kind of project that is being undertaken by man has to do with being supported somehow on the earth. And so we're involved in several projects, including water projects. And part of my background is to determine how water flows through the ground and gets into the ground, and what kind of damage it can cause and what kind of benefit it can be. So Ricardo and I teamed up about 20 some years ago on water projects, and we've had this joint interest in how we can do things better as engineers and benefit mankind for the future as well. So anyway, that's a little bit of my background, huh?
Right.
And I'm not an Arizona graduate. I graduated from the University of Colorado.
All right.
Go Buffs.
Our friends to the north. I'm going to try to work with this panel and tease out a lot of the details that were teed up by the mayor a few minutes ago. The mayor did a fantastic job of really articulating the idea of stewardship, hard work, and going at an idea with great people and great teams. And Ben teased that out as well. Today we're going to talk about the problem we're trying to solve, the opportunity that we want to explore, the technical factors that are important, the legal rights that we have to respect, and what's happening on the ground right now and what we're trying to put on the ground in the future. So to begin with the end in mind, our story today is about moving water underground faster to avoid evaporation and to reach the local aquifer quickly. We currently have a field trial set up in one part of Arizona to test an infiltration technology to determine its viability for recharge, and we're working to set up a second project here in Prescott Valley. This team of people and another network and group of folks that they all work with are leading those efforts, and we're going to talk to you today about the collaboration that is existing in a really great way. And I'm going to go to Tracy first with a question to really tee up the problem we're trying to solve. Tracy, in your introduction, you mentioned the term safe yield. And you operate a municipal system here inside of an active management area, which is part of Arizona's groundwater code, and you have a responsibility to try to meet the concept of safe yield. Can you speak about the challenges of drought and what safe yield means to a community like the town of Prescott Valley?
So essentially, safe yield is, for those of you who are not in the know, it's a policy construct that was put into place with the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, essentially defining a state wherein an aquifer is not being measurably depleted relative to the demands that are being put on it by pumping. So in 1999, the Arizona Department of Water Resources, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to call it ADWR. So I just wanted to make sure that we've got acronyms laid out here. But ADWR declared the Prescott Active Management Area, which we are in, to be out of safe yield. And that put into place a number of things, including some restrictions on further build out within the active management area. And And we've been working under those auspices ever since. So essentially, the aquifer is being depleted at about a foot a year, approximately, on average throughout the active management area. We, as folks that live within the active management area, my objective as a steward of the aquifer is to try to get water into the aquifer, right? Try to stop the draining, if you will, of the aquifer. That's important because as you remove water from the aquifer, it's going to change the properties of the aquifer such that you try to get that same amount of water into the aquifer, you're not going to be able to do it. You're losing volume to be able to void volume to be able to fill. I don't know if I'm wandering off course here, but I just wanted to define what we're talking about with safe yield.
So with that challenge and looking for opportunities, let's talk about stormwater as a potential opportunity. Ricardo, you came into the town of Prescott Valley's picture to help with stormwater mitigation. Can you talk a little bit about what the idea of stormwater in a community like this, and what is the traditional way to handle stormwater?
Yeah, so traditionally, a developer's engineer needs to deal with two things: on-site stormwater management, on-site being on-site of the development, as well as off-site stormwater management. On-site stormwater management basically in Arizona is through retention basins. And those basins need to be sized to handle the 100-year, 2-hour event. Off-site stormwater management is essentially allowing off-site stormwater to flow through the development and make sure that there's no adverse flooding effects in accordance with the local floodplain administrator who is adhering to FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program.
And a follow-up question. Has stormwater traditionally been treated as an asset, as a nuisance, as an opportunity? What are some of the ways that stormwater has traditionally been viewed?
Stormwater has been treated as a nuisance, as a threat to public safety and to property. And so all the standards to date are designed to get water off the property or off the land as quickly as possible.
So for all of you, the main idea here is we're trying to go from the concept of stormwater as a nuisance to stormwater as a missed opportunity. And for this group, infrastructure becomes a really important part of that conversation. With flood mitigation, with the other tools and assets that you have, I want to go to finding the opportunity and kind of coming together really is focused in a story that happened about 2.5 years ago. As Ricardo was working to help the town of Prescott Valley with their stormwater management plan, there was a conversation that was started by the town manager, Gilbert Davidson, internally, and he said, if this is a missed opportunity, how do we have a conversation about it here in Prescott Valley, but also around the state? Who can we talk to? How can we work on the idea that this might be a way to capture an opportunity? In trying to figure that out and trying to create a table where we could have a conversation, the legislature was in session. And there was a series of bills that were introduced that essentially created the table for us. And that opportunity turned into a conversation. The bills did not progress to any measurable degree, but like most opportunities at the legislature, it started a conversation between these parties. Lucas, can you kind of speak to the key pieces of how that conversation went and how it was an inviting opportunity for you?
Yeah, sure. So as sometimes happens at the legislature, the legislation gets ahead of the science sometimes, and that was the case in this scenario where there was language proposed that tended to step on the feet of other legislation that had already been passed related to active management areas and existing groundwater regulations that were already in place. So we said, well, okay, maybe there's something here. Let's have a separate conversation about what is this bill is trying to accomplish. And it was trying to do a good thing. It was saying, let's take advantage of this opportunity, a missed opportunity to get stormwater into the ground faster and to help aquifer conditions. So that was the intent. What we needed to do is better understand the science behind it. And that's when we kind of established this group together and said, what is the opportunity? And we've kind of had a mantra that we've all been talking about, which is water that is otherwise lost to evaporation. So if we can do something with water that is otherwise lost to evaporation, then there's an opportunity here. Let's see what we can do around that. Let's see what the science suggests and then follow that and then have a policy conversation later on.
So I want to go to Don because Don's quite passionate about this missed opportunity. Don, can you talk about storm events and what falls on the ground and then eventually what evaporates? Can you talk in generalities about the missed opportunity?
So in general, and there's been several studies about evaporation in Arizona, but I'm going to reference as early as the 1960s. The Bureau of Reclamation did a study and reported, based upon their evaluation, that 95% of the rainfall that falls on the state of Arizona is lost back out to evaporation right now. And it occurs, some water infiltrates into the ground, some of it's used by plants, but it doesn't get very deep. It runs off very fast, and 95% of it's lost. And from a soil engineering standpoint, this evaporation process, here in Prescott Valley, for example, the evaporation potential is twice the amount of annual rainfall that we get. So that's the kind of potential evaporation losses that we're talking about. The other lost opportunity is that there is some misconception, and Ricardo sort of teed it up about how we manage stormwater and flood events, that we build these on-site retention basins. And I think that there's some misconception that, boy, that's doing good because we let that water infiltrate into the ground. But the other thing that you need to realize about evaporation is that pull actually pulls water that's infiltrated into the ground unless we get it deep enough. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's the lost opportunity here, is that we've got one of our great assets is sunshine, but it's really detrimental to this whole concept of getting water into the ground because of the evaporation potential.
Any other comments on that before we move into what we're doing with the project? Lucas?
I'd just also add there's kind of more recent studies that suggest that level that which you need to get water into the ground so it doesn't come back up and evaporate is it can vary based on geologic conditions, but we're talking in the order of like 17, 20, 25 feet. So you got to get it below that so it stays in the aquifer.
So 3 years ago, the original task was, let's update Prescott Valley's stormwater management plan. Ricardo comes on the scene. The new town manager dealing with Tracy and the team facing the idea of safe yield and growth and trying to be responsible stewards of water resources. And a desire to have a conversation with some of the most important parties in the state and in this region, SRP being preeminent among those, fostered by a legislative action, brings us all together. So then we start talking about how can we try to capture this missed opportunity. And that's where the Red Rock project starts to come into focus. So I want to turn to Ricardo and Tracy and talk about the location and the content of the idea around what we call the Red Rock Project, and how it was identified, some of the parameters of how the project's working, and just kind of run with the idea of these people want to see if we can beat evaporation and how we're trying to do that.
I think let me piggyback a little bit on what Lucas was saying. Hunter brought me in to SRP in April of 2024, and I did a comprehensive presentation of the litany of practices and treatments that I have acquired and have become a practitioner on a demonstration site that West Consultants has in Red Rock. The one thing that I recognized, or I was asked from the team at SRP that was apparent, is that they zeroed in on this one technology, a technology that was developed by a company named Parjana. And the way I see it is that this technology is some form of a biomimicry that mimics tree roots. And at that time, we were also having conversations with the Central Arizona Irrigation and Drainage District, and presented, similar to Prescott Valley, the potential merits that this technology could have in agriculture. And so the founder of Parjana, Don Clark, and I were exploring ideas on what that could be, but then this group expanded, or that group expanded into this group, and it became more of a legitimate approach. And so what we're doing in Red Rock is a true independent engineering study to contribute to the engineering community as a means of how we can deep accelerate the percolation of surface water. What we decided to do was pursue a WIFA grant last year, and we were very fortunate because...
Hold on just a second. For those who are not water buffaloes, WIFA is the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. It's a state agency that was augmented with a number of dollars several years ago that funds different types of projects for water augmentation, research, and savings. Keep going.
Yeah, thanks, Hunter. So with Hunter's help, we were able to get this grant approved and funded, and it has a 26-month timeline, and we just were installing the technology week before last. But what it is that we're wanting to do here is verify a model that actually Terracon took the initiative without me even asking them, and I was heartened to see, and this was actually in the presentation to SRP in April. What this is a finite element model that looked at what is occurring evaporation-wise with these retention basins that are on private development. But then it also modeled this technology. And what we began to realize is that there appears to be a potential here to deep accelerate the percolation of surface water, in this case stormwater. But the point is, and the pitch to WIFA was that this technology and what we're doing to deep accelerate this percolation of surface or stormwater it could have both municipal and agricultural applications. And that's why Katie signed up with a nonprofit that I also run to pursue this grant and verify what this model was showing. One last thing before I cut off here that I had learned from Don was that when they did the geotechnical study, the boring analysis, I had learned from Don that the soils in Red Rock are 10 to the minus 6 to 10 to the minus 7 in terms of imperviousness, and that's a reference to what's called a hydraulic conductivity. That is 10 to 100 times greater than EPA's requirement for a rural clay liner for a landfill. And the reason we want to do a project here in Prescott Valley is because of the degraded basalt of Glassford Hill creates fatty clays, and in some areas it could be 10 to the minus 8. So even more impervious than what's in Red Rock. So we're really going to be putting this technology to the test, and that's the impetus and the purpose of this study.
Really quickly, for those who haven't been to Red Rock or need a picture, can you describe what the two different basins look like, what they are, what they're set up for, and just an idea of what the experiment's going to look like.
Sure. So because it rains so erratically in Arizona, we're pumping groundwater to rapidly test two 50 by 50 foot basins, and those are bottom dimensions. The top dimensions, because these basins are roughly 4 feet in depth, are 82 by 82. The basins are about 600 feet apart because we don't want them to influence each other. The northernmost basin is the control, and the southernmost basin is the enhanced basin with these technologies. So we are pumping groundwater into these basins. Takes about 90 minutes, 2 hours to fill, and then we let it sit and see how fast the water infiltrates. SRP was kind enough to also donate and set up a weather station that's going to help us with the evaporation effects that Don was talking about earlier.
Not only are we measuring the rate of drop in the ponds, but we've got moisture sensors in the ground. And the point of those moisture sensors, we've put them in as deep as 45 feet so that we can see how the water is actually traveling through the ground, how deep it gets in both the enhanced and unenhanced basins. And this will be used as part of our process to prove out our finite element model that we've already put together to show how the water goes in and out of the ground in both of these basins, the one that's the unenhanced and the enhanced basin. So we're not only measuring the water into the ponds, but we're looking at how that water gets into the ground as well in these moisture sensors that are a data-driven process that I can't remember. We record information every 15 minutes or something like that. And so that will be used to, again, refine our modeling and find out how this process is going to work.
Thank you. I want to turn to Lucas and ask the question, aside from the technology, what's different about this particular process, this engagement, than others that you've heard of or seen? You know, kind of talk to us about what's the uniqueness of what's happening here.
I think the uniqueness of this project is really kind of the approach that we're taking to doing this. It's a collaborative effort. It's kind of letting the science guide where we go and doing it kind of in a controlled environment where we can evaluate the technology by itself and independently of any other conversation that's going on. I think sometimes where we see in other areas, you know, stormwater is either seen as a nuisance to get it away, or it's, you know, wrapped up in a policy conversation where there hasn't been good science done to it. So that's really where I think this is a unique project and helps us to kind of evaluate the merits of the technology as well as the opportunity, and see what the opportunity is. I think we want to understand, you know, how great of an opportunity is it. If it's a small opportunity, there's a lot of costs, you know, associated with it. If there's a big opportunity, let's take advantage of it.
Thank you. I want to go to Tracy, and you can't have a water conversation without talking about whiskey and fighting. It's the greatest cliche of all water buffalo conversations in the West in particular. But I want to turn to Tracy, and I want to ask this question. It's a little bit facetious. Tracy, is Prescott Valley trying to take anybody's water rights?
No. And that's actually one of the things that I keep coming back to when I think about this whole project and our involvement with SRP is that I feel really good about the relationship that Prescott Valley has been able to establish and maintain with SRP because that has not always been the case. And you know, I think, and I don't want to like put words in Lucas's mouth, but I feel like this is probably a logical offshoot policy-wise at SRP. Nobody wins if everyone is short on water, right? And we in Prescott Valley are conscious of the fact that we don't want to intrude on someone else's rights. You know, there's 100 years or more of history here that we want to be able to be very conscious of as we're trying to carve out this small bit of water that could make a real difference in the more remote areas of Arizona. All the water that is flowing to the north from here during stormwater flows, heavy stormwater flows, the stuff that makes it to a final destination that isn't the atmosphere is actually going to the Verde River system. And, you know, that's SRP's water. And we want to make sure that we are not actually encroaching on water rights downstream.
So can I add something else? Just
Please.
one of the interesting things that we've done in this project is to kind of ask the question, you know, does the water that's intended for any of these projects hit a natural channel? That's kind of a key term because that's what separates what's surface water and is already appropriated by folks like SRP and what is eligible for local aquifer recharge. So that's kind of a key question. So it's a site-by-site evaluation that has to be done. Is this site, does it hit a natural channel or not? And that's a question that's been asked, and that's part of the collaboration that we've done.
So with any, so let's get, I don't want to bore anybody or on a Friday put you to sleep, but let's talk about some math. And I went to law school for a reason. It wasn't because I was great at math. I want to go to Ricardo, and it's tied to the water right conversation, but it's also tied to how do we know that we're really getting to a missed opportunity and not somebody's water right. So I want to go to Ricardo first and ask you to talk about something that we are calling, and this is a new term for most of the folks that out there, we are calling this urban enhanced runoff. I'll say it again, urban enhanced runoff. And can you explain why we're trying to come up with math around that term and what it means for the project?
Sure. So to piggyback off the slogan that Lucas shared, we're looking at water that would otherwise evaporate and to be able to harvest that and harvest it in a way where we're not affecting downstream water right holders such as SRP. Urban enhanced runoff looks at the watershed from a land use perspective. So water right holders are entitled to the water rights that flow off a watershed under its natural conditions. When you develop that land, when you develop parts of the watershed, it begins to change the land use and therefore change how stormwater runs off the land. It has the effect of increasing time to peak and also the peak flows. And engineers need to be able to manage that, as I was saying earlier, in order to control flooding and treat water like a nuisance. So what we're looking to do, what we've been looking to do, and the team has been looking to do, is figure out the volume of urban enhanced runoff, which is basically the delta of volume, the increased volume due to development. That's probably the best way to describe it. This was born out of a project that I did in Cochise County, downstream of Sierra Vista. It was the first approach that the team that I was on at that time were figuring out how to do it, and I think it's come a long way. And so what we have done for the town with SRP lockstep with us is come up with a simplified approach where we were looking at historic rain gauges of watershed natural conditions and comparing those conditions against developed conditions, and then not to get too deep into the math and geek out on you, it's just focusing on identifying that volume. So we really wanted to do that to understand is this volume greater or less than the volume for the required on-site stormwater retention that we spoke about earlier on the panel discussion. And what we're finding out is that urban enhanced runoff volume is routinely less than on-site stormwater retention volume. But both volumes of water are available to be harvested and to be put into the aquifer.
Don, since we're trying to get more water into the ground, how can we measure that? How does that, what type of technology can we use? What kind of factors are important as we look at trying to get more water into the ground? What would be key in the information that we start to gather?
Well, there's several things. From a soil engineering standpoint, we need to look at, particularly with respect to these retention basins and making better use of them, what the ground conditions are at each one of those locations. And instead of just infiltration rates, we need to look at the hydraulic conductivity, how fast the water flows through those soils. We need to look at the soil suction characteristics, not to get too technical, but we got all kinds of different soils in the state of Arizona. They all have different water retention characteristics, and they actually absorb water into them, but then they release them through the process of evaporation. And the science behind this is that by knowing certain engineering properties of the soils, the plasticity characteristics, the grain size characteristics, and the like, we can actually look at each one of these basins and determine what we soil engineers call the depth to constant soil suction. And that's what Lucas mentioned earlier. We know that could be as great as 14, 20 feet in the ground. So if we're going to take advantage of the use of water, storm runoff, we got to look more specifically at soil properties, do analysis to determine how deep we've got to get the water into the ground so it's not sucked back out in the atmosphere by evaporation and all the sunshine hitting it. And if you don't think that the sun sucks water out of the ground, you can just go to any dry lake bed and see all kinds of cracks and the like, and that's water being sucked out of the ground. If that were down deep enough, it's not going to be sucked back out, and once we get the water into the ground deep enough, I can tell you from a fluid flow standpoint, it's going to continue to go on down to the aquifer, but we don't want it to be sucked back out. So this evaporation process not only affects surface bodies of water, but it affects water that's in the soil as well. And we got to figure out how better to take advantage of that by designing and engineering basins that are right now, quite frankly, just used for water disposal that are really not having any beneficial effect in terms of recharge.
Thank you. I want to start with Tracy. We're doing work now in Red Rock, and there's an effort to put another sister project, what we're calling it's not a pilot, but a field trial here in Prescott Valley. Can you talk a little bit about the process so we've done the design work, and we've got an application in front of WIFA. WIFA was mentioned earlier. Can you just talk about what we're looking at in terms of a second project here in Prescott Valley?
So it's obviously dependent greatly on the grant funding. We are actually on the docket for the next WIFA meeting on Wednesday, I believe, to actually secure funding for that particular project. The design is just starting now, I think, for the Prescott Valley project, if I remember right. If the money comes through, then I think within the next few months we should be starting in on the project. It's slated to be in the Pronghorn development, and the two basins, we're going to be doing a similar setup with two basins about 300 feet apart, if I remember right. And so we'll have a control and an actual test basin. So as a scientist, it makes me happy. I'm doing actual science. It's kind of fun. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
So a fair point. Is this about science right now? Is this about policy right now? What is this about?
It's science. It's science.
Okay.
We want to make sure that this is a good use of the money, because we would like to be able to set up more of these types of situations around the Prescott Valley area to get more water into the aquifer. So this is kind of we're doing a little R&D work here to see if this is a viable alternative to stormwater issues here in the Prescott AMA.
Terrific. So I'm going to go to general wrap-up comments. I'm going to start with Don, go to Tracy, Ricardo, and then because Lucas is our guest here from SRP in the town of Prescott Valley, I'm going to give you the last word if that's all right. So just general thoughts on stormwater, the work that we're doing, the need in Arizona. Please give us your closing thoughts.
My closing thought is that I hope, it's my fervent hope by both the Red Rock project and the project that we may take here and undertake in Prescott Valley, is that we can actually change policy in the future on how we look at stormwater disposal. Because right now, as a geotechnical engineer, I can tell you, having done analysis, that we're not taking advantage of it. So I would hope that by demonstrating what's going on in both unenhanced, enhanced basins and both of these test cases, that we can open some eyes, that we need to take a different look on how we're engineering stormwater disposal basins so that it could be beneficial, put to beneficial use in the future. I would hope that policy would change from the science that we'll gain out of these two test programs.
I think this is just really exciting to be able to try to innovate a new, just moving forward, trying to change the way we traditionally do things. Because clearly at this point, we need to alter our relationship with water fundamentally in the state of Arizona.
Thank you, Tracy. Ricardo.
In 2012, I became certified in water harvesting in Tucson from an outfit called Watershed Management Group, and I learned that some of the affluent areas in Tucson, the wells had already started to dry up. That's the concern that's happening here in Prescott Valley. So for me, yes, science is the focus with the prelude to what Don was saying in changing policy. So I think my concern is, my hope rather, is that the team is able to demonstrate a level of prudence and wisdom to know that we've collected enough data to move forward and we don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. And that's going to take some thought. It's probably going to take a decision maker or some decision makers to say, we've got a lot of data, we've got enough data, or whatever you want to call it, coming out of these two field trials. We probably should start moving forward because the clock is ticking. So that's kind of how I see things. I'm on the fence. I want there to be clean science. I want the science to be profound. But I also think that at some point we need to make some decisions and start making some changes too. And so I would be looking to leadership, Gilbert, for making some decisions. And hopefully I didn't speak out of turn, Lucas.
Mr. Shaw.
No, I think we want the same thing. We want to see the science behind it and know that the benefit is being realized if there is a benefit. And the worst case scenario would be to end up with what you think is happening, to not have it happen, and to not get the aquifer recharge that you think is happening. So that would be the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is you forecast, you think this is what we should see, and you get even more. So that would be kind of the best case scenario. We're committed to this project. Financially, we've committed some funding should the town receive WIFA funding. So we're all in on seeing where the science goes. And obviously, we benefit, the river benefits from this type of science, and the town will benefit from having done it, regardless of what the outcome is.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our time. I first want to say thank you for your attention and for being here to learn about what's happening in the town of Prescott Valley and the leadership that is really being taken on for a tough subject. I also want to thank our panel here. They've done a great job in explaining and working to get you the ideas. Following the meeting, we'll have a little bit of time. If you have a question that didn't get answered, Please seek out our panelists. They'll be happy to talk with you as the session wraps up. Let's give these folks a round of applause.
So, panel 2 is open space, land management, and wildlife corridors. And the moderator is Vinny Gallego, and he's with SIMPO. Vinny Gallego, I'm going to turn over the mic to you.
Hello, my name is Vinny Gallegos. I'm the Executive Director of SIMPO, and we'll help out with the acronyms today. So Central Yavapai Metropolitan Planning Organization, a mouthful. If you're not familiar with our organization, we've been around for a little over the last 20 years, government organization that's focused in the movement of people, goods, and services in a safe and efficient way. So we focus on regional transportation planning, and it's my privilege to be up here with a group of colleagues and experts in their own field. And I'm very honored to have been asked to be the facilitator of this session. Just a brief background as to what SIMPO is working on is as we look at our transportation system, and we look at our highways, our significant roadways, bicycle, pedestrian, trails, public transit, again, it's the movement of people, goods, and services in our community. And you know, I heard the word earlier today, and I want to stick with that from the mayor and other presenters of stewardship. You know, that's something that really resonates with many of us, me in particular, and I think I have the fortune that my family settled in Prescott around 100 years ago, and much of my family is still there to this day, and I look at, you know, the growth and the development and all that's taken place, but in all those 100 years, I know something that's been very important to me and to my family before me is to be stewards of the resources that we're given, and that's really the theme today, and how do we best steward the resources that we have. And as an organization, I'm very proud that I work with a very great staff, and I would ask my staff to stand and give them a round of applause for their efforts, please. So if you haven't had a chance to meet them, Bryn, Amanda, Jesse, and Tyler, I really encourage you to take some time to meet them because again, as an organization, we're looking to be stewards of our community. We're looking to have a conversation with you and figure out where does the infrastructure fit to the quality of life that we need and want in our area, and where does it tie into this conversation? SIMPO understands that it's the infrastructure, whether it's a bicycle path, a trail, a major highway or roadway, ties directly into the greater environment. And it goes directly into this wildlife conservation conversation. So with that said, I'd like to give the opportunity for the panel to introduce themselves. I'll start on my far left with Sandy, and we'll work our way towards Jeff. What I'd like you to do is name who you represent, and really where do you tie into this conversation today? Sandy?
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Hoffman. Where I am from, I'm with Logan Simpson Design out of a Tempe office, and what I've had the honor to do is to manage a project for Prescott Valley. It's called the Wildlife Corridor Foundation Guide, and it will be followed up hopefully with a wildlife plan. And so my involvement with Prescott Valley has been through that, and also some help with the Parks and Rec Department. Tying into the other panel members, I would like to let you know that I have a landscape architecture degree from U of A, but I have an environmental planning, master's of environmental planning from ASU, so I can root for either team.
Thanks, Sandy. John?
No, you can't. John Jacobson, Principal Planner, Development Services, Town of Prescott Valley. And my tie to this is being the project manager on the town side, working directly with our consultants, with Sandy, their scientists, biologists. It's really been eye-opening and you know, a wonderful experience. I too have a degree in landscape architecture, so we have that in common. I went a little different route earlier in my career, development, consulting for almost 3 decades. Grew up, I'll do a little background, Vinny, because the first panel kind of laid it out there. From Maine originally, the great state of Maine, and have been in the, went directly to the Valley, Phoenix Metro, again, consulting master plan communities, went through the housing boom and just learned a ton on the development side. And that's what attracted me to make this transition to the public side and hopefully offer, through a different lens and be able to coordinate these types of things, whether it's a wildlife corridor or our day-to-day activities in development services. I mean, we talk about ASU, U of A, okay, but it's Ohio State, come on. So, thank you, Vinny.
Hi, I'm Kim Shonick with the Nature Conservancy. I actually live up in Chino Valley, so I see many of you in the Verde Valley. I see you in Phoenix. So it's actually quite exciting that you're all up here in the neighborhood. So thanks for coming. I also usually talk about water. I'm the water program director. I work statewide on a wide range of water issues. And it turns out that water and wildlife corridors are very linked and highly connected. So I'm excited today to be able to talk about wildlife and nature and maybe a little less on water infrastructure, although I do love talking about water infrastructure. We had a meeting last week, and I think we talked about septic tanks a little too much. So really excited to be able to think about wildlife and wildlife corridors, and those places where we choose to protect for wildlife and provide those benefits can also have connected water benefits. And so this is a really great thing that the Prescott Valley has pulled together here in thinking about both water, wildlife, how do they connect, how do we work together, how do we think about transportation in light of all of that. So that's me.
My name is Jeff Gagnon. I work with Arizona Game and Fish Department. I've been there for a little over 28 years now. A lot of focus of my career has been on wildlife connectivity and wildlife vehicle collision mitigation. So when you see animals hit on the road, I've been working a lot with that kind of stuff, and then connecting wildlife from point A to point B. I actually grew up here, young child. I grew up here in the late 70s, early 80s down here on Sunset Lane when there was only a couple cars a day, and there was a little school out in the middle of the field. And so there's a place in my heart for Prescott Valley area. I live in Camp Verde now, but so not too far away. I went to school at NAU for both my bachelor's and master's degrees. So. Yeah.
I forgot to do my school affiliation. So I'm a lumberjack. We're kind of like Switzerland when you get between Wildcats and Sun Devils. So we're just steady in the background, Jeff and I. So NAU, master's degree in public administration. My bachelor's is in psychology and community planning. So we have about 50 minutes in total when we started for this session. So we're going to spend some time asking some preset questions of the panel. I'm going to ask a question for two of them, move on to a next question, change it up a little bit, and then we're going to try and see if we can't have a little bit of time at the end for questions that you may have. So this first question I'm going to focus on, we'll start with John and then we'll go to Jeff. On this first question, why should cities and towns, counties, balance the need for open space preservation with ongoing population growth and development demands? So I'll start with John.
We talked about this earlier. That's a softball because think about it. We are public servants, okay? So to that end, it's right in our wheelhouse to pay attention to these things and actively participate in it. And so what I'm saying is it's incumbent upon us, public servants, to take responsibility for these types of things. And when I say these types of things, whether it's conservation, development, and again, be stewards of each of those. And we don't see it as being binary. It's not conservation or development. Our goal is what you'd expect, to have this harmony between the two. And that's really our focus. And I think it's a real challenge for all involved, no matter where your interest lies, to really buy into that and understand it. And we remind ourselves, don't get me wrong, we don't have this all figured out. But if I take the question and put it specifically to development services at the town, I mean, think about our day-to-day activities. We are compliance regulate. I mean, we take in these development requests and applications, and we measure them against our policies, as simple as that sounds. But when we get that tunnel vision, what we lose is the knowledge that it's a living document. These policies are living documents. We're always reevaluating. We're always looking to see how to improve. You heard from the water folks, same philosophy, same approach. These policies are not stagnant. So what you see in this case, specifically development services and this wildlife corridor that we've been working through, it's the same lens. It's how do we balance this? Yes, today, this whole past year, consumed with this special project of the wildlife corridor, don't be misled that that's our only focus. This is the end result, is what I stated, to have this balance. So what we do is we identify these needs, we talk about the scope, we talk about, let's look long range, what's the implementation strategy? These are all questions we have and that we walk through as part of this process. And we enlist specialists, whether they're biologists or water folks or the Conservancy or Game and Fish, and we recognize as overall project managers and looking at all of the considerations and really make sure that we don't get any sort of tunnel vision, whether it's conservation or development, that they all need to work in concert. And that's really, to answer the question, that's really why we feel the need and why we're involved in this. And we'll talk a little bit more about how this plays out. But that's really why public agencies need to identify these needs for conservation development and water and all of the things that we consider. Circulation, Vinny mentioned. One example would be on this local conservation effort. And I would like to mention, and that's why Vinny's involved in here too, one of the things we say is this is regionally coordinated and locally implemented. So again, I mean, wildlife habitats, ecosystems don't know boundaries. They don't, well, Jeff will tell you they know roadways. I think Jeff enlightened us on Pronghorn in one of his talks last year, that if a particular roadway has over 5,000 traffic count, if you look at ADTs, that Pronghorn won't cross. And of course, me trying to be funny, I would say, well, I didn't know Pronghorn could count. But the point is, there are barriers, but they're not the town limits, they're not the county limits, they're not the state limits. So there's a lot to unpack and a lot to consider, as you might imagine, working through these types of things. And we love the challenge. And we're looking forward to this coming year for the next phase of this wildlife corridor, which will result in the plan proper that you might envision when we say wildlife corridor plan. You know, we go right to the end product, and that's where we're headed this year. And that's why we see the importance and see the need for public agencies to really be at the forefront and drive these types of studies and plans.
Thank you, John. I'll go ahead and repeat the question, and this will be for Jeff. Why should cities, towns, counties balance the need for open space preservation with ongoing population growth and development demands? Jeff?
Thanks, Vinny. One of the things that has come up multiple times is future generations. And if you look at Arizona Game and Fish Department's mission, that's the last two words of the mission is future generations. And so as, you know, developments happen, the decisions we make today will affect those future generations. And one of the things that I want to touch on, I want to take a step back on and talk about some of the impacts to wildlife and what needs to be balanced. For example, there's two real main things that happen. There's habitat loss. So if you have an area where wildlife are living and you turn that into something else, that's one less place that they have to live. They have to move on to somewhere else. They're usually living in their ideal location, but then they're pushed out to other areas as more of their area is taken over. And then there's the habitat fragmentation side, which John alluded to with the traffic volume, but that happens with development of any kind or energy or whatever it may be. Things can happen to where those animals can't get from point A to point B for increased survival. And you start to get to a point where if those animals are completely cut off from opportunities to survive, then they become a less viable population and they'll start to decline and eventually can fizzle out. And so keeping the balance of the habitat and the connectivity between those habitats intact is going to lead to a longer term solution. And you know, in some areas, if you go into Phoenix, you see areas where there's mountain ranges in the middle of the town. Those used to have deer in them, different animals in them. Some of those are void of that now. So here in Prescott Valley and the surrounding areas, you've got to still have a lot of opportunities. And so it's neat to see that there's this forethought to be able to try to address and make this balance that John was talking about before, because population growth is going to happen, but there are smart ways to do it from a quality of life perspective for our future generations.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to go to question 2, and we'll go to Kim, and then we'll come back to Jeff on this one. Kim, what are the main challenges to establishing and maintaining effective wildlife corridors in our region, and how can they be overcome?
I'm actually going to let Jeff start because he's the expert.
Sure. So the question again, main challenges is establishing wildlife and maintaining wildlife corridors in our region, and how can they be overcome. So some of the things I came up with was time, money, and collaboration. So from a time perspective, it's kind of like what I just talked about. There's available resources for wildlife corridors and the habitats that can be connected, but they go away quickly. A lot of them are planned to go away. And so being able to do something now is important, because it's just going to continue to, there'll be areas where it's going to continue to, remove wildlife or block wildlife. And so taking what you have to work with and making some of these decisions now can help that down the line. From the money side of things, there's a cost for corridors and habitat, whether it's building a wildlife crossing or establishing a corridor, or even the cost to developers for not establishing or for not building in areas where there's a wildlife corridor. And one of the things to think about is it's hard to put a value on that quality of life and the future generations enjoying the wildlife around us. So trying to think about that, and it seems like a lot of folks in this room kind of think that way. So it's a positive direction to go. So just keeping those in mind. There's ways to overcome some of the things like funding sources. There's, examples are like in Pima County, they have a regional transportation authority of Pima County where they were able to raise funds for wildlife corridors and stuff like that. So I won't get too much into the weeds on that unless anybody asks about it, but there's examples on how that can be discussed. And then collaboration's a really big one. So what we see is areas where different landowners or jurisdictions or whatever it may be, if they're adjacent to each other, and I'll give an example. Let's say there's one jurisdiction has a habitat block that wildlife live in, one landowner or jurisdiction has a corridor in it, and then there's another one that goes into another jurisdiction with another habitat block. If one of those partners, if you will, doesn't address wildlife, open space, and corridors, then it basically negates the effectiveness of the other two. If one of those is lost. So thinking large scale and being able to collaborate with all the partners that are involved is super important in having everybody on board.
Thank you, Jeff, and I'll repeat for the audience. What are the main challenges to establishing and maintaining effective wildlife corridors in our region, and how can they be overcome? Kim?
Yeah, I think Jeff hit on so many good points. And when we think about what are barriers, we're thinking about things like roads, we're thinking about development, but we're also thinking about things like lack of water. So you can only go so far in between water sources. So we need to make sure that water is available across the landscape, not just for people, but for the animals that live there. The other, I think, challenge very broadly is perception. So I live in Chino Valley. It looks different than Prescott Valley. It often looks kind of maybe like what you want in a rural community. I have an acre. My neighbors are pretty far away. We like to think of ourselves as just being out there in the country. We're not really. We have Walmarts. We have 3 Walmarts within 25 minutes of my house. So when I moved here, and I was told I was moving to a rural community, and I got here, I was like, wait, no. This is not rural, and you forgot to mention there is snow. So, it has changed a lot in the last 16 years since I've been here. But perception is a huge challenge with people who are moving here, and they're envisioning that very rural vision of life, and they see things like subdivisions that are planned and thoughtful and have shared water utilities. Those shared water utilities are great for water management. Very wide dispersed parcels are hard to get access for water and water services. But also when you have planned area development, you can bring in more people into those acres, which means we can meet our housing needs with less land disturbance. So we want to make sure that we have wildlife corridors, but we want to protect habitat as well. And so we completed a Verde River Watershed Report Card in 2020. We'll be updating that with a release hopefully September or October this year. And that's in partnership with Friends of the Verde. I saw a copy of the report card floating around. But one of the key things that we learned in that is this kind of nexus between affordable housing, workforce housing, and people's interest in having high-density housing. So high-density housing is often seen as kind of bad for the wildlife, and there's so many people in such a small space. That's actually really good for wildlife, right? We want to make sure as we develop, we're doing infill in our communities, so staying within a planning boundary, not wildcat subdivision out into the rangeland. So that's something when we think about challenges, the planning and zoning regulations that fall within our cities and county can influence where people build, and that really influences what habitat is available. And also how can wildlife move through those habitats. So I saw 6 mule deer in my backyard randomly. It was actually on the flood control lot in my backyard. I was so excited. It's the only time I've seen deer in my house in 16 years. I have no idea what they were doing there, actually. We'll ask Jeff after this what the heck they were doing. But you know, that opportunity to see wildlife is something we all want. So one of the reasons that our towns and cities need to plan for wildlife is so that our children have those opportunities. It's great to go out and go for a hike, but it's even cooler when you see wildlife when you're out there and can really appreciate that. So I think, you know, those are broadly, I think Jeff hit on so many good points, but that perception about what is beneficial is absolutely critical to address so that people understand why we need high density, why we need planned area developments, why we should not have wildcat subdivisions just sort of running rampant on the landscape. So I think let me check. I think I hit on them. Maintaining effective wildlife corridors. I think that's another really important challenge. How do we maintain the corridors that we have? And we'll get into solutions here in a little bit, but I think having funding and commitment for maintaining these corridors is also, you know, a big part of it. Our ranch lands are out there. We see the ranch lands. We think these places are going to be ranches into the future, and we can't assume that. Ranching is not a high profit business, and you know, times are changing. We have these pressures, and that goes back to our planning and zoning rules as well. So I think that's probably enough of an answer on that one.
Thank you, Kim. So let's move on to the next question, and we'll start with Sandy on this one. Sandy, what role should public agencies, nonprofit organizations, elected officials, and the public have in the effort to ensure sustainable cohabitation between wildlife and the community?
All right, well, thank you. Everything that Vinny listed there is essential, and you each have a unique perspective. And I bet everybody in this room here represents some part of that. You're part of a government entity, you're part of an elected official, you are a nonprofit, or you're in the public. Public covers everything. All the engineers were here for the water discussion, all the business owners, property owners. And so you represent a whole group of different dynamics, and I think that's what's really critical is you need to have involvement where we collaborate and coordinate and communicate together, because each of you brings something to the table that is very important to be able to move forward with a proposed solution that could be effective and that everybody could buy in with. And one of the key things is data collection and data sharing. So I think what's important, we have some information when we did the foundation guide that Arizona Game and Fish Department had, but they even admitted we really don't have the most up-to-date data that we could have for Prescott Valley or for the region. And so there's a need to be able to get all of these different entities to move forward, and the the nonprofits, a lot of them have done their own boots on the ground research. It's fantastic. And we found some of these people when we were doing our outreach for the foundation guide. And it's fantastic because they're like, yeah, we have a website where people report where they see wildlife. And so it's like if we could get the data together, analyze it, create some maps, be able to truly understand, okay, what is happening and where. And part of the work that we did on the foundation guide was existing conditions. Because you really need to know the existing conditions before you decide, okay, is this really working the way it is, or is there some challenges? Where are the opportunities? Where are the constraints? And so having all the different broad viewpoints and everyone being able to feed into that. So the main part also would be to evaluate options. As we move forward into the future, you each have perspectives. So now we have a baseline, we've got data. Well, okay, how are we going to move forward? And I think it's critical for each of these people to have a role. The public entities, the elected officials, definitely. And the public has to be part of it. We had a community event during the Foundation Guide where we and wanted children. We had a booth for kids. Kids came. We had the zoo from Prescott bring a skunk. That was interesting. The skunk, ferrets, tortoise, a snake. They had pelts and hides from different animals. It was an educational opportunity. And I think that's part of the critical part is when you're trying to evaluate options, you need to be able to have it out there where you obtain feedback, but you also educate people about, okay, what are the factors you need to consider as you're trying to move forward with trying to do open space preservation of any kind, at the same time with wildlife corridors, wildlife habitats, what do they need, and then also be considering development, as we'll discuss a little further in the future. So the tools to be effective. Vinny and I have talked. Wildlife, and certainly Jeff knows, wildlife don't just stay in Prescott Valley. So when you do analysis in our map graphics, they're going to show that the flow of corridors can start up in the Grand Canyon area and come on down through the Prescott Valley area and move on down in Chino Valley and other areas. And so it's important to be factoring that in and working together at that level. So it's not just the local governments, it's the regional, the nonprofits, it's the public, and be able to have a way, and we'll discuss more later about some tools of how to do that. But part of the case studies we gave some options. So we did analysis of 34 of the sort of wildlife corridors in the western U.S. Then we narrowed it down with some ranking to 5 in-depth case studies. So having that data is what's the basis to be able to move forward. And again, involving everybody is critical.
Thank you, Sandy. We'll give the same question to you, John. John, what role should public agencies, nonprofit organizations, elected officials, and the public have in the effort to ensure sustainable cohabitation between wildlife and the community?
That's a lot, Vinny. The good news is Sandy covers it just perfectly like she always does. That was fantastic. So I think what I'll do is I'll speak specifically and maybe elaborate again on the town side and the public service and those things and what our role is. I touched on it a minute ago. But to expand on that, I mean, initially you would understand we're facilitators. We think amongst ourselves and resources that are available to us and start to identify what the needs are. What needs do we have to better serve the public? What do we need to address, what we need to do, and we start to scope that, and we look to leadership to participate in that to make those decisions. So from a process standpoint, on the public side, specifically through development services, like I said, we have our daily activities, we're always looking at these living documents, but as facilitators, again, we start to identify priorities and needs, and from there, we scope it, we start to talk about budget. How can we budget this? What are our resources? What's the priorities? We set the priorities. And these things rise to the surface, and we look for funding, whether it's grants or these types of things. You heard it from the water folks. We investigate that, and we look to grant writers to help us identify these things. So that's really the step through more specifically what our role is. So it transitions maybe from facilitators, or that's the thread through the process, but then transitions into contract writing and scoping and budgets and all the things that we do so that we can head towards this implementation. And then that's a whole nother effort, as you'd imagine. You know, once you do the data collection, form this foundation guide, now we're entering into what I term the plan proper, this phase 2. You know, it just continues and gains momentum, but there's so many moving pieces to it that our role is on the, at least the town side or the public side, is to be that project manager working with the consultant's project manager and really draw out their expertise. And I know from the consulting side, you know, I did not observe this at all, but again, we can get into this pattern of how we do things. And you heard it from the water folks. And so what we force ourselves to do is go, okay, we understand that, but how can we improve on that? How can we be innovative? Even in this process that I'm talking about that is really sterile, right? But how can we improve that? How can we be more efficient? How can we be more effective? And when we get to implementation, what is that strategy? And we look to the experts with their experience on the most effective implementation strategy. And then we enter into that through our lens and knowledge that we might have. We want to contribute. We're part of the team. So we're not just administratively involved in this. You know, we have a great team at the town, you know, all departments and right from the leadership down. And I'm always reminded when we get together and we work across discipline, across departments, and we get together for our strategic meetings with the leadership in the town, the knowledge that we have is really exciting. And I think we all recognize that we need to make sure we tap into that and not get into that, getting back to this routine, well, this is how we always do it. And we agree amongst ourselves, if anybody says that, if the answer is why we're doing it this way, if the answer is, well, that's the way we've always done it, if somebody in our group says that, we ask them to leave the room. I mean, we know this, we say it because we want to remind ourselves that that's not an answer. That's a non-answer. Is that a consideration? Yes. But let's push ourselves so that we can accelerate and get to this point where we can be more confident in we are leaving a legacy. And you hear it, you know, we all have this long view of where we want to end up. So this implementation phase, I'll call it, takes all that into consideration. And like I said, it can be complex, but the art of the fact is we simplify it, knowing all these considerations, and that's really a task at hand. So that's a long answer to what our role is, and there's more, but I'll leave you with that.
Thanks, John. Sandy, we'll go back to you. What are the most effective strategies for balancing open space preservation with ongoing urban development?
All right. It's a really great question, I think. I think what you first have to really do, like we did with the Foundation Guide, is you need to understand what's already in place. Yavapai County's comprehensive plan, Town of Prescott Valley's general plan, what policies, what goals, what visions do you have in place for your area, and what regulatory things that you have as John was commenting on, what regulatory, what guidelines, what things do you have? So you understand the basis of where you're starting to work from for developing effective strategies for balancing open space preservation with urban development. One of the key things you do is we did a map for the Foundation Guide of, okay, where is there development right now? And then where is there open space? Because if you look at it visually, I think for me, I'm a visual person. I could see it. And I'm like, now I can see where the openings are. Okay, how do we deal with those? Who owns the land? Who manages it? What does the future general plan say for that? And then looking, okay, where do we go from there? And the open communication and participation, as we mentioned, with all the different stakeholders, all of you in this room with your different perspectives and all those beyond, building a consensus is important. And so first, collecting information from all of you, like I mentioned before, just sort of downloading everything, getting it in a place where everybody can do an analysis of what they have available. And then doing a science-based analysis and doing education and outreach. So I think it's wonderful, the Green Living magazine, because what they're doing is getting education out there. They're getting the news out there and info for people to be aware of what's happening and maybe start to look a little deeper into it and maybe be more involved, because I think it's important to get that catalyst going where you start to talk to other people and bring them into the conversation and have them have an opportunity to be part of the solution-based decisions as they move forward. And some of the things we got from the case studies that we did were a variety of different tools, which we'll be going through as we go through the wildlife plan in the future. And when you talk about development, we had different listening sessions, we had focus groups, we had work study sessions, we had a community event when we did the foundation guide. And we included one example would be Arizona State Land Department, and I don't think they're represented here today, but Arizona State Land Department, as you're aware, they basically, their role is to manage the land and sell it for the highest value to get revenue for schools. So their number one priority is, okay, how big a development can I get on my property? Well, they were part of our listening sessions and our focus groups, and what we found was interesting is they said, we're fine with open space, we're fine with corridors and habitats, we think they're fine. Just still give us the density we want. And so it's like, okay, there are tools out there, and it's just trying to educate people and make neighborhoods aware, okay, maybe a little bit more dense development near you. You might think, oh, I don't want that. I want the rural feel. But the balance is you're going to have more open space. So if you look, I mean, the views from these windows are fabulous. And the fact is, you want to be able to have that here. It's part of the community. It's embedded in the northern part of Arizona. It's why people down in Phoenix like me go, I really want to move up there someday. I mean, it's just this goal, a vision, not only the weather, but the beautiful scenery. So I think it's important for the strategies to balance open space and preservation to have involvement and to get the community support through it, and inclusive partnerships. So we all need to be partners in this and to build a consensus to move forward, and working together with all agencies, whether it's a state agency, the nonprofit groups or the public or whoever it might be. They need to be part of the decision so they take ownership of it. And as you said, we're stewards of the land, we're stewards of the earth. How do we make it for a healthy future for our future generations, and also consideration of healthy ecosystems for all that are alive, all animals. And we had a monarch butterfly, if you didn't see it by the window a few minutes ago, and I'm sorry, monarch butterfly migration, and I'm like, so even insects, we got to think about that. So all of the things that can be done to try to preserve some area with healthy vegetation and water, because wildlife needs water, could do a benefit for everybody, creating sort of a healthy ecosystem.
Kim, what are the most effective strategies for balancing open space preservation with ongoing urban development?
Thank you. I think Sandy covered so much there. I just wanted to highlight a few additional ideas and some specific tools that can be used. So, the first thing is to look at where we already have public land. We have a lot of public land across the state. As many folks know, we can look out, we can see the Prescott National Forest over there. How do we connect to that through existing public lands? We have Arizona Game and Fish Department's Upper Verde Wildlife Management Area that's just north of Chino Valley. So that's another excellent open space. And one of the projects that I just want to mention is the Del Rio Springs Headwaters Ranch State Park project. And if you just looked at a map and said, here's Del Rio Springs Ranch, it's just plopped down there north of Chino, that connects to us here. So you could actually walk up over this mountain, you would find a lake, you could get on the Peavine Trail, and you can move north. Not quite all the way just yet, but people are making that happen where you'll be able to get all the way up into Del Rio, and then from Del Rio you'll be able to get to the headwaters of the Verde and be able to connect with the game and fish property. So those corridors are really important and vast, and how do we build on that existing infrastructure? So Del Rio was an excellent example of looking at where did we have big blocks of habitat, and where could we create and protect open space to improve that corridor, not just for people, but for wildlife as well. So I think that's kind of the first step, is building on the existing, what we have, connecting that, and then looking at other tools. So one tool I do want to mention is conservation easements. I'm from the Nature Conservancy, so if I didn't mention it, I don't know what happens at your review, but I don't think it's good. So conservation easements are a really unique tool that we can use to protect land in its current state. So a conservation easement removes the development right from the land, so it does have an impact to the local community. So we want to think about where is the right place to do this. These are not tools that you want to put everywhere. They're very expensive and they're very permanent. And so we want to be careful in where they go and how they're applied. We want to be careful about the rules that you're putting in place with a conservation easement. But a conservation easement can continue to allow a rancher to ranch or a farmer to farm. So one great example, if you, again, kind of think to the north of us, the Wells Ranch has a conservation easement on it. So between Del Rio Springs and the Verde River, there's a very large cattle ranch. That ranch will always be a ranch. I think most of us who've been out there and looked at that agree that that's a pretty good place to keep a ranch. One, to protect the river, to continue to have that local open space, that rural characteristic that we're looking at. So I think as we think about tools and what we can do, conservation easements are one tool. They're not always the perfect tool. They're not where we should be thinking, let's get everything covered in one of these, right? That's not the solution. And I think a lot of times when people hear about easements, they think, oh, well, you want to put that on my place. We don't want to put it on your land unless you want it and unless your land is in a place where it makes sense. So they're very thoughtful application of these easements is what's really needed, not a blanket, these belong everywhere kind of approach to things. Some other kind of strategies that we can think about, planning and zoning. So the Yavapai County County Plan, who lives in Yavapai County? Have you read the county plan? Okay, go read it. It's really, really good, right? So know what's in the plans where you live. It's got a great backbone. And so those plans can be a great resource. Continuing to think about where we develop and how we develop, which of course we've talked a lot about here. And then again, I just want to emphasize the importance of density and thinking about planning and growing and infill as an important part of what we want in our communities. When I moved here 16 years ago, you didn't see a lot of light when you look towards Mingus Mountain at night. You see a lot of light. So that's another factor to consider is light pollution. How do we think about that? We have more houses, we have them more spread out. What does light pollution do? How does that factor into some of these other ways that corridors can be utilized? So I think that's probably enough strategies for you all to think about.
Thank you, Kim. And as she was saying, she reminded me that I want to share with you as an organization, SIMPO is very proud this month that we're going to be launching our regional trails plan. And when she was talking about, again, that ability of connectivity, you think of the Peavine, you think of the new state park out in Chino Valley. So again, it's taking inventory over the next year. SIMPO is going to work to take inventory on what we have as far as trail walkability, and then what is the vision? And that, again, comes from you, it comes from our stakeholders, it comes from the municipality, but again, a trail doesn't just stop at a town boundary, it goes throughout the region, much like this wildlife conversation. So again, as I introduce my staff, I want to remind you that Amanda Hart's our project manager, she's here today. We're kicking off that study and we'll be doing that for the next year, but it's essential that you participate in that you help author that you help cast the vision, that we identify what do we want for our trail system as it goes into this conversation, what do we want for our open space and our wildlife, and help those plans be shaped so that in years to come, as they're implemented, you are a part of that. So let me then take this opportunity to say, really want to thank our panelists, not only for the work that you do, but really a passion. And I think that's what we heard in the voices today, that this is more than just collecting a paycheck. This is something that these folks have devoted a great deal of energy to, and it's a life passion. So will you please join me in giving them a round of applause? I also would like to thank Green Living Magazine, the town of Prescott Valley, and I think if we heard anything today, that this is a conversation to be continued, and I think we have a room full of people, and we have momentum, and this is very clearly, we heard it over and over again, yes, we appreciate the town of Prescott Valley, but this goes beyond the town limits, and it even goes beyond even the region, and I should have clarified this, our area is all of Yavapai County, excluding the Verde Valley is what SIMPO covers, but I also know Maury Thompson is here from the county, covering all of the county. And there was a recent article that the Board of Supervisors and the county manager and staff, again, are looking to more actively participate in this discussion. So again, think if we keep reminding ourselves that wildlife doesn't know what a SIMPO boundary is, a Prescott Valley, a county, and all these different things, and if we approach the work truly hand in hand and we look at the work we do and we take the ability to really respectfully enter into this conversation with a real passion and think outside the box, I do think we can accomplish great things. So I want to truly thank you all for being here. I want to thank Green Living, Town of Prescott Valley, and let's continue the conversation. So give yourselves a big round of applause. Thank you very much.